Good morning and welcome to the first and special called meeting of the Joint Development Authority of the Unified Government of Athens-Clarke County and the City of Winterville. I'm Ilka McConnell. I'm the Director of Economic Development for Athens-Clarke County, and I'll be serving as staff to the JDA. If you will, just for sound quality, if you wouldn't mind just for the moment hitting mute, I think that might help us. So the first thing that I'd like to do this morning is call us to order. And if everyone had a chance to take a look at the agenda that I sent out beforehand? So I would like to ask for a motion to approve the agenda, please.
So moved.
All right, and a second?
Second, Erica.
Okay, thank you. So we did that. The next thing I want to do is introduce and hand it over to Dan McCrae, who will be working with us as counsel for the Joint Development Authority. And he will be talking us through the bylaws, which I apologize, we sent out probably 25 minutes ago, but they should be in your inbox. And Dan will walk us through the bylaws. And there are a couple of items within the bylaws that we'll need y'all's input and discussion on.
Thank you, Ilka. You know, I've been fortunate enough in the course of doing this for so many years to be in on the initial meetings of a lot of development authorities and meetings where the development authorities have been reconstituted. It's an exciting time. And there is a process that we follow, and we, for one thing, consider the bylaws before the election of the officers because the bylaws spell out what the officers do. The bylaws are adopted by the board. Once they're adopted, the board has to follow them until the board changes them. And I'm going to digress a little bit. You know, we've got these sidebar training conferences coming up tomorrow and the next day, and I hope everybody's going to be there. You'll have 4 hours tomorrow and 4 hours the day after to cover a lot of this stuff in great detail. What I'm going to try to do today, though, as we go through it, is to cover what you need to know so that you can make an informed decision about what you're doing. And there's an agenda item for Joint Development Authority orientation. And like everybody else in the world, I've got a PowerPoint, but it's real short. And I'll be touching on some of the things that are the most important now as we go along. And that said, I'm going to try to get WebEx to let me show you the bylaws. Let's see here. Aha, I'm making progress. All right, so it looks like it's booting up now. Can you all see that? Do you see bylaws on your screen?
Yes, sir.
Good. Mm-hmm. All right, great. So these are the bylaws that are before you for consideration. A lot of the bylaws are dictated by statute. We're governed by the Development Authorities Law, which is 3662(1) of the Georgia Code. And I'm not a big believer of putting things in the bylaws that the law doesn't let you make a decision about anyway. So these bylaws mostly focus on what's up to the directors to specify, although to some extent there's some things in here to keep you alert to what your duties and responsibilities and powers are as you go along. So in section 1, you see that you're created as a joint development authority under the law that I just cited. Section 1.2, you see your name, Joint Development Authority of the Unified Government of Athens-Clarke County, Georgia, and the City of Winterville. That is the consequence of what is in the activating resolution, which were the concurrent resolutions of the 2 local governments, which is mentioned in 1.3. So general purposes and particular purposes are mentioned here. Basically, this just says you've got all the power that the Development Authorities Law gives you. Sometimes those powers are restricted in the activating resolution, but that wasn't done this time. Well, Why is it not letting me show the rest of the bylaws? I have no idea what to do next.
Let me see if I might be able to, let me see.
Well, you know, I'm prepared to walk through it without the benefit of an audio-visual aid if it takes it. And the developers do have a copy, so maybe you can do that if you like.
Is it possible to resend the bylaws? Because I'm not seeing anything on my screen and I didn't get anything in my inbox.
Neither did I.
Resend it? Okay, let me see. I wonder if it's stuck in
Yes,
my
please.
Outbox.
I got it this morning.
Okay.
I've not had a chance to read them yet.
One second, I'll resend them to everyone.
I got them.
Okay, that's Simone. Okay, great. And then I just resent them to everyone else.
All right, well, I'm going to try to stop unless this works. Oh, there they are. Do y'all see them now? Look at there.
Yes, I can see it.
Yes. Yes.
I just kept clicking around until I clicked the right thing. That's IT for you.
Great.
Okay, so moving on down, principal office. We need a principal office. When the Development Authority's law was written and the revenue bond law was originally written, there was no contemplation of authorities that were multi-jurisdictional. So in order to comply with some things like where you go to validate bond, revenue bond law, we need a principal office and a regular of meeting. And so we specified City Hall in Athens as that. 4.2, this is where we need director input. You are, I construe the law to require you to be regularly, although no specified periodicity to that. Most JDAs meet quarterly, but whether it's quarterly or monthly or even more frequently than that, we would put in our bylaws when we meet and how often we meet and what time we meet. So this might be once each month on Wednesday at the regular meeting place of the authority at 10:30 o'clock a.m., if, for example, that suited you. And we don't have to decide now. In fact, I've seen bylaws adopted without that being filled in. But we need to talk about our next meeting when we get towards the end of the agenda regardless. However, why don't I just drive through the rest of the bylaws and we can come back to this and maybe y'all can be multitasking and thinking about when would be a convenient place to meet. But remember, these virtual meetings are very convenient. They work well for me. And they're going to be authorized until July the 12th at 11:59 a.m. or whatever, a.m., p.m. anyway, a minute before noon. So it doesn't matter that much right now. But when we start meeting in person, you need to think about the logistics and the convenience of the meeting schedule and the time of the meetings. 4.5 is just a reminder that the authority is a public body and you board members are public officials. If none of you have been a public official before, congratulations. You probably, it's a blessing and a curse in some ways. So we'll have to see what happens in terms of the demands that is made on you. But one of those demands is that the authority's meetings are open to the public except for an authorized executive session. And this meeting is open to the public now because the WebEx link was shared. And we also will have to comply with open records and that sort of thing. So I'm sliding through the rest of it because it's pretty routine. In 5.1, the law dictates the titles of the principal officers. We have to have a chair, a vice chair, and a secretary and a treasurer or a secretary dash treasurer. They are elected by the board members. The terms are left up to the board to decide. The normal term is a year for officers, but it can be anything that you want. Standard of Conduct 5.2. This is a reminder that the board is subject to the Code of Ethics, which is a state law applicable to all members of all public bodies, except the General Assembly. They always exempt themselves. And it requires a lot of things. What you see here is the safe harbor for financial self-dealing. Sometimes it's proposed to the authority, and sometimes it's a good idea that there be a transaction between the authority and some board member or some board member's entity. And this is a way to purge that transaction of a conflict. Basically, it's people talk about recusal, but there's a lot more to it than that. Aside from what you see here under the Code of Ethics, this is financial self-dealing is just one of 9 things to look out for. And again, if you attend the sidebar, you'll get an hour on that. And I do have PowerPoint presentations on. If anybody wants a personal copy of a PowerPoint presentation that deals with this, let me know and I'll send it to you so you can study up on it if you want to. And there are things like fiduciary duty that is baked into being a director of a public body. The Code of Ethics really has to do with interaction with the public, but there's fiduciary duty involved with this, just like there is with any public position. I'm getting into specification of the duties of the officers, but those are what you'd expect. The chair is the CEO. The vice chair steps in for the chair when necessary. The secretary keeps the minutes and all. Treasurer keeps the money. If you have a secretary or treasurer, they do both. You can hire or appoint. You hire if you've got money, or appoint if you don't. An executive director who takes the load off the officers and the board. I do these training programs. I do them for Carl Vinson and GMA, as well as my own sidebars. And I always ask the board members how many of them have staff, and it varies between 25% of them having staff to 60% having staff. It's a difficult position to be a board member of a busy authority and not have staff. Non-member, also nothing there. Fiscal year. We elected to propose the fiscal year of Athens-Clarke because that'll be the financing source, and that fiscal year ends June 30. And the seal of the authority, we've ordered a seal for you, but it has not come in yet. We don't really have to do anything today because we don't have to approve a seal on our first meeting. If you want, when we get the seal, it will be a circular form, and it will have the legal name of the Unified Government of Athens-Clarke and the name of the city of Winterville, and it will have the date of creation, which is April 27th, 2020, when we got the second activating resolution in. So the board, when we approve the bylaws, you can also approve a seal in the form described, or you can just wait until I can show you an impression of the seal, whatever suits you. And then lastly, Article 9 lets you amend the bylaws. Sometimes the bylaws make it difficult to amend. There's an advance notice requirement that, whenever it seems like every time you want to amend the bylaws and there's an advance notice requirement, the timing doesn't work out. So that's not in these. As you can see, these are, how many pages is that? 8 pages for a lawyer. That's pretty short. I do think it covers everything that needs to be covered, and I'm happy to answer questions if you've got them.
Do we have to adopt them today? Because given that we received them like 15 minutes ago, I would prefer to read through them before I voted yay or nay. I don't know how other people feel.
We can defer that. If we defer adopting the bylaws, we can also defer electing officers, but I wouldn't worry too much about going ahead and electing the principal officers if we wanted to do that. I think it's clear enough what their jobs are. And I myself personally don't like to have board members feel uncomfortable with being asked to vote on something that they haven't had a chance to look at and have their questions answered. So, or you could abstain if enough board members want to vote and there's not a problem with that. then you personally could abstain and the others could vote, or we could just defer it. It's not mandatory to do it on the first meeting. Other board members, what do y'all think?
This is Stephanie. I'm fine either way.
Yeah, and Erica feels the same way. They seem pretty straightforward.
This is Kelly. I would just say if anybody's uncomfortable and we can continue to progress with the substantive business at hand and then revisit the bylaws, let's do that.
Do we need a motion to table the bylaws?
Well, they're an agenda item. What someone could do, well, I can do it since I'm talking. We can ask for a motion to adopt the bylaws, and if there's no motion, or if there's a motion and no second, then we move on down the agenda.
Okay.
So do I hear a motion?
I'll make a motion to adopt the bylaws.
Do I hear
I'll make a motion to second it.
Okay, motion second. Any additional comment or questions? All right, then we should have a roll call vote. Ilka, can you do that? So as we call a name, we get a yay or a nay?
And this is Kelly. I'll just, in parliamentary procedure, I'll make a substitute motion to table approval of the bylaws.
I'm not a parliamentarian, but that sounds good to me. I suppose we need a second to that.
Second that.
Roll call vote on the motion to table.
Ilka's on mute.
Well, all right, I'll do it. But somebody, I've got a pen here.
I got Timothy Pierce Tomlin.
Yay.
Okay. David Matthews Morgan. David, you might be on mute.
You can give us a thumbs up or thumbs down.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, yay.
Dodd Farrell.
Yay.
Erica Casio.
Yay.
Simone Cifuentes.
Yay.
Stephanie Lynn. And Kelly Gertz.
Yes.
Thank you.
Unanimous. How does the board feel about the seal? If we're not adopting bylaws, and I don't see any need to adopt the seal, so maybe we could have that subsumed in the preceding motion, and if it's the will of the board, we can take a look at electing a chair if y'all want to elect officers today. I mean, just general discussion. How do y'all feel about electing officers?
I would prefer to have a meeting under our belts so we can learn more about each other before we decide who would best fit each office.
I second that opinion. I agree.
Okay. What I can do is I can create a document that shares a little bit the background that each one of you shared as part of your application process.
I would be okay with that.
Okay.
I think that's great. Y'all are going to be together for at least 4 years, so let's do get to know each other.
I'll work on that.
Okay, well, if we're done with that agenda item, I'm prepared. I've tried to cover some of the things that are most relevant as we go. I will, if I can get WebEx to do it, I will show you a PowerPoint that is oriented toward this JDA, but also gives you a kind of a broader picture. Let me just ask, can everyone see the title page here?
Is it supposed to be blank?
No.
I'm on Skype, so I don't see any documents. Can I request that they be emailed to me so I can split my computer screen?
Yes.
Either.
Yeah, all I see is a gray screen.
Dan, I'm getting the gray box as well.
I don't know if that's the fault of WebEx or of my inferior WebEx skills. Yeah, that may be a problem. I think that's what happens when there's not enough bandwidth to convey the image.
And if you can email me a copy of the PowerPoint, I'll be glad to email it to the group.
Okay, let me do that now.
Is there not a share screen option?
There is, he's having a difficult time getting it to show up.
Okay.
Oh, well, no, there's their other file.
Let me try again. I honestly think a minute ago that was a bandwidth problem. What do you
There
say?
you go.
Yes, sir.
So I was converting it to PDF, and for some reason that worked. Well, great. I'm relieved. So, as I was saying, I'm going to give you an orientation to authorities in general, but not at great length. Because, again, for those of you who can go to the sidebar this week or another day, we'll have another one in August. You'll get a lot of that, and I want it to be fresh and new and interesting to you. But I guess I should ask, one thing I should have asked at the beginning, do any of you all have experience with being authority board members before?
Yes.
Which authority was that?
I was on the Downtown Development Authority.
Oh, good. So separate rules for DDAs in large part, and the Athens-Clarke DDA was authorized by a constitutional amendment and implemented by a local act. So it's not exactly like the other DDAs. Your development DDA training would be, to really be effective, would need to be oriented directly towards your DDA. But you have experience being a public official and with authorities and how they operate, and that's good. Anybody else?
And I'm on the Economic Development Authority of the Unified Government as well. And so I've been through that. I guess it's an 8-hour Vincent training.
I remember, and thank you for coming. All right, so that's 2 out of 7. For those 2, this isn't so surprising to you, the job you're stepping into and the mission and what's expected of you. For the others, it's new, and this is very serious. What we are doing with a new authority, and particularly what this JDA is probably going to do, is its initial mission, or its initial project. Projects are usually sticks and bricks, but our initial project is not going to be sticks and bricks probably. Is pretty serious business, and it comes at a serious time. So I want to make you aware of that. I want to give you the basics about the basics. If anybody has a question, that I'm happy to answer it today. If it occurs to you in the middle of the night, don't call, but send an email or leave me a voicemail message, or seriously call during the day. And I'm happy. I get questions from all over the state about authority stuff, and I'm always happy to talk about it. So with that, this, I say, is the most important chart that anybody will see who is involved with authorities. This is an area chart. I'm a chart geek and Excel geek. Georgia was one of the 13 original states, so we've had a lot of constitutions, and we've had a lot of laws passed over time dealing with authorities. So without getting into everything that you would hear at a training session, just know that in 1969, which was the year after I graduated from Emory College, the Development Authorities Law was passed, and that created a statewide pattern of development authorities. If you look back in that timeline on the left, you see that in 1968, the Georgia Constitution was amended to authorize development authorities. So there's a discrepancy there, a little bit of embarrassment to those who passed the Industrial Authorities Law. But, for 40 years, we've had a Development Authorities Law in this state, and it's the same one. It's been amended a lot. Today, it's about as modern as it can be, given the constraints under the Georgia Constitution. To further empower development authorities, the Constitution would have to be changed. One thing about that constitutional amendment is that it vested the power to do economic development, trade, commerce, industry, and employment opportunities with development authorities, not with local governments, but with authorities. Georgia is an authority state. And in the field of economic development, redevelopment, and community development, we're development authority centric. So the statutory Downtown Development Authorities Law, which focused on the Central Business District, was passed in 1981, and that was the same year that joint authorities were authorized. So we may take today for granted that more than one local government, more than one county, more than one city, a city and a county can join together, but that was not legal until the law was changed to permit it. And that is not a recent change, but if you look forward to 2004, there was a good change. The original efforts to authorize joint authorities, or actually a restriction that was added later on having to do with the job tax credit, said that counties could not belong to more than one. So in 2004, it became legal for counties to belong to more than one joint authority, and the joint authorities originally were authorized for the purpose of regionalism. I mean, a lot of communities in Georgia are very poor. I was born in Dublin and grew up in Telfair County, and according to some statistics, Telfair County was the poorest county in the entire country that year. So we probably have more counties than we need, but regionalism is a way to share costs, spread costs across larger areas and so on. And that was Zell Miller's effort at the time. Today, JDAs are more used as special purpose entities to target a particular problem or to bring to bear a particular solution. And that's kind of what we're doing with this new JDA here. All right, so the chart here is also something to keep in mind as things get confusing, as the statute says one thing and the Constitution says another. The top is the U.S. Constitution and the Georgia Constitution. This is in order from the most in power to the least in power. And you see your humble lawyer down at the bottom where he belongs. But at the third tier with the specific laws, you see laws that the General Assembly has passed under the Georgia Constitution addressing specific things. And one of those was the Development Authorities Law, which was amended to add 3662 5.1 authorizing joint authorities, and then amended again in 2004 to authorize counties to belong to more than one. So our JDA is not founded on the Constitution. The Athens DDA is not a constitutional authority. It was one that was authorized by the Constitution, but the DDA didn't come into existence until the local act was passed. So with, and some or otherwise, Athens-Clarke has a constitutional development authority that was created under the Georgia Constitution. This JDA is not that way. We are a creature of statute. We are authorized by the Development Authorities Law and a particular subsection of the Development Authorities Law having to do with joint authorities. And I'll show you some of the special things about that in a minute. Applicable laws is like a shotgun. The General Assembly may not have intended to wing us when they fired that shotgun, but they did. With the Open Meetings Act and the Open Records Act, they did intend that to apply to everybody, except, again, the General Assembly. So just keep in mind, for example, if you use your cell phone to send a text on official business of the JDA, that text is something that somebody can ask for under the Open Records Act. The next step down is the local government, and that's the city of Winterville and the unified government of Athens-Clarke County. The two local governments came together, adopted a concurrent resolution, and created and activated this JDA. And they also then acted to appoint directors. So we have 4 from Athens-Clarke and 3 from Winterville by actions of those local governments. The board will, I'm sure, eventually adopt bylaws. And you see that the bylaws are on top of the board. So if there's a procedural matter like the advance notice of meetings that the board wants to change, the meeting to change the notice for the meeting will have to be held in accordance with notice given in accordance with the existing bylaws. So you have to follow the bylaws until you change them. Officers, the board sets policy and adopts resolutions. The board is responsible for day-to-day actions of the authority. In practice, that's usually the chair working with other officers as necessary. The staff, ILCA is loaned staff. It's hard to get anything done without staff. An attorney, I'm a loaned attorney to help the JDA. So from top to bottom, that's how it works. And again, if you have some cognitive dissonance going on where you're trying to figure out which way to go, this chart will tell you. This is the hierarchy of what controls with what we do. So going back to 1994, JDAs had been authorized for a while, but weren't really very popular and weren't used very much until, in an effort to incent regionalism, the job tax credit was amended to allow counties in a JDA's area to get a bump in the level of job tax credit. That is an incentive to reward businesses for locating and expanding within the jurisdiction. So the more people that are employed, the more tax credit that there is, or at least there's more tax credit for doing that. We've been through that process, but just so you'll know, concurrent resolutions, the number of directors. So we have 7, and it just happens that a statutory citywide or countywide authority is authorized by the Development Authorities Law to have between 7 and 9 members. The statutory DDA has to have exactly 7 members. The JDA lends itself to being customized. So we could have anything from 1 to any number of directors. If we have participating jurisdictions, they all don't have to have appointments. They don't have to have the same number of appointments. In this situation, we have 4 members appointed by Athens-Clarke and 3 appointed by Winterville. In terms of office of the members, that's 4 years, and that's because it was set forth in the activating resolution. The citywide and countywide statutory authorities also have 4-year terms, and that's dictated by statute. In this case, this was just the decision of the local governments. And residency requirements, again, that can vary. It's possible for a member of a JDA to reside anywhere within the jurisdiction of the JDA. In this case, Winterville directors need to reside in Winterville, and Athens-Clarke directors need to reside somewhere in Athens-Clarke, which is anywhere in Athens-Clarke, incorporated or unincorporated. And there is the ability, this sectional takes away a prohibition that the common law, which the state follows, having to do with self-appointment. In the absence of this provision, the local governments could not have appointed one of their elected people to the board, but that's authorized, and it's authorized 1 for each, and that's what we have, and I think that's great. This doesn't show up very well, and I don't know that I can expand it. Maybe I can. I'm going to try. Oh, did that expand on your screens?
Yes.
Okay, well, I'm going to quit fooling around. It's hard to read anyway. This is a 2017 map. It's the latest that Department of Community Affairs has. And you can see that virtually the entire state is part of a joint development authority. There's some lag behind down in the southwest. Those are largely not very wealthy parts of the state, unfortunately. And for all I know, in the last 3 years, more joint authorities have been activated. There's really no reason to do it, although if it's a joint county authority to get the job tax credit, you do incur some requirements, including quarterly meetings and having an operational business plan. But just to let you know, I think that, as I was saying, JDAs have become more popular, and they have begun doing a slightly different job, or maybe an additional job that's slightly different, which is specific work usually instead of regionalism. I was trying to find earlier today what existing joint authorities Athens-Clarke was a member of. There was a research corridor, JDA, which Athens-Clarke was a member of. I'm guessing that has become the Georgia Innovation Corridor Joint Development Authority. So there is an existing joint authority that Athens-Clarke is a member of. There's at least one of those. Does anybody know of other JDAs Athens-Clarke or Winterville is party to?
I believe there is one more that's similar to the one you discussed that includes Oglethorpe County and maybe even as far over as Elbert County. But this is week 7 or 8 on the job, so I don't know all the details yet.
Well, that's a heck of a JDA with that territory.
It's big.
And that may be the bioscience JDA. DCA's changed how they maintain their records and the access to the records. Used to, I could just look up and tell you who the members were, but it's all they give you now is a list. But mainly this is to illustrate that y'all are not alone, that this is not something weird the two local governments are doing. It's a very normal thing. Most of the state has already done it. In fact, Athens-Clarke has done it at least once, and it sounds like twice before. So JDAs are good tools to have in the toolbox. Jurisdiction. Those of you who go to the training will see a different version of this, where you have one of the projects. I've been blessed. I think it's a blessing. Have 3 different large economic development projects plumped down on county lines. One was Caterpillar, which was Athens-Clarke and Oconee. And there were 2 others. One of them was Meriwether County and Hogansville, where we had a county city JDA, but the city was in a different county. Here we've got a county and a consolidated government and a city within the consolidated government. So basically this JDA has jurisdiction throughout Athens-Clarke. So everything's blue. All right, this is something in our next meeting that we're going to have to spend a lot of time on. A lot of effort has gone into figuring out what can be done in terms of emergency and recovery programs. You know, because I've covered it, that the Development Authorities Law, which is the JDA law, is part of that, goes back to 1969, which was a long time ago. And back in the day, I know because I was there, development authorities just met on call. They didn't have regular meetings, and they were called to issue bonds, which was infrequent. And the job of the economic developer was to show dirt, usually undeveloped dirt, and usually for manufacturing and occasionally for a warehouse. It's a different world today. The legal system has not kept up with that, and our Supreme Court is conservative. They construe the law pretty conservatively. It's hard to get movement. As times change, their opinions don't. But we've made some progress in the last few years in terms of what's viewed as economic development and what's viewed as promoting trade, commerce, industry, and employment opportunities. That's what the Constitution says. But the law that we've got to work with is the Development Authorities Law. And in terms of financing, the JDA can issue bonds to finance projects. And a project is defined as bricks and mortar and equipment. It's not working capital. So the JDA is not authorized to make a working capital loan as such. We have to find another way to do it. About the only way, in fact, the only way, because I've looked, in the Development Authorities Law, if you want to do something in the nature of financing or providing credit that is not bricks and mortar and equipment, it's something connected with the promotion of industry, agriculture, and trade. And it's those 4 nouns and no others because that's what's in the law: industry, agriculture, and trade. The courts have interpreted industry, oddly enough, broadly. I mean, it picks up the service industries, for example. Trade is usually tangible things changing hands, and agriculture is agriculture. So when we take a look, and Ilka will be getting into that next, at what our other programs might be, we need to keep in mind what our statutory powers are. We've got the overall constraint of the Georgia Constitution. Remember that pyramid chart, which is a funnel chart technically. The Constitution's on top, and the specific laws are under that. And our Development Authority's law is one of those specific laws. And this is what it specifically says about what our powers are when it comes to financing. Please keep that in mind. More about that later. Again, if you attend the sidebar, I'll get into this a little bit more detail. So questions, there I am. I'm happy to answer questions now. I'm happy to answer questions as they occur to you. Just let me know. So what do you think?
I think I'm
Dan,
looking forward to the training.
Sorry?
I said I'm looking forward to the training.
Oh, good. Well, I'm glad you're going to participate. Thank you. It won't just be me. We have a star-studded roll of speakers. We're getting the executive director and the public affairs manager of the Association of County Commissioners of Georgia to speak about the federal money that's hopefully going into the hands of local governments. We've got someone from GMA, and from the Georgia Downtown Association speaking about what different communities are doing with their programs. So we've got a session on open meetings, open records, conflicts, and that sort of thing. So it's going to be a good couple of days. Questions now, then?
Dan, I had a quick question about your last slide where you were talking about the industry, agriculture, and trade, and you were listing things that they can be used for. Can you give me some examples of things that can't be used?
Can't be used as a program?
So you mentioned with trade it had to be tangible goods. What are some examples that you are aware of things that have been excluded under that system?
Well, again, we're talking normally about sticks and bricks, right? So there are cases having to do with a conference center that says that doesn't work under the law, but that's been basically overruled by the addition of subsection N to the project's definition, which is 366226N. So that code section says that a project, but remember project, the list of projects is tangible things. So anything tangible that promotes trade, commerce, industry, and employment opportunities. So if you wanted, for example, let's say we had a local business, and let's say it's a restaurant, and you were willing to loan them money to buy a new grill. I mean, I started life as a soda jerk in my uncle's drugstore in McRae, so I know about cleaning grills and grease traps and things like that. They don't need a grill, so we're not doing them any favor to offer to loan them money to buy a grill if they don't need a grill. So what we would like to do in this hypothetical example is to provide them some money that they can spend on other things. So how do we go about doing that? Well, we have to find something that allows us to find a reasonable connection between advancing money and the promotion of industry, agriculture, and trade. So if you are a government, I mean, all local governments are struggling now. We couldn't loan money to a local government because it's not industry, agriculture, and trade. We couldn't do anything having to do with single family residential housing because that's not industry, agriculture, and trade. If we go back to our restaurant, so for example, let's say that restaurant was willing to commit to buy agricultural products on a farm to table program and to serve dishes that were promoted, Athens cuisine, if there's such a thing, and to allow us to use them as an example of a successful business that's continuing to thrive despite the pandemic. So a reasonable means of contracting with them to do those things might, instead of just paying to acquire their services, might be to make a loan to them in exchange for which they agreed to do two things. They repay the money. I mean, their Constitution says, and the Attorney General says, you can't make forgivable loans, and it's very difficult to do grants. So the loan has to be repaid, but that's not enough. We're not in the business of loaning money except for tangible things. They have to agree to do these other things. So that was a quick word picture of an example I think might work, where the board could say, okay, making this loan to this restaurant under these circumstances promotes industry, agriculture, and trade, and it's okay. It's proper exercise of our powers.
Perfect. Thank you.
So Dan, it sounds like operating expenses are not anything we could ever help fund, yet the idea of this money being a relief fund for small businesses seems like a far reach for people that are struggling just to stay open and to have to build a project that meets the requirements of all the law. Is that what I'm hearing?
You hear that on one level, but with me, no is never the final answer. So the mission is and again, I'm speaking hypothetically because we don't have a program in place. Ilka's going to talk about our program next, and maybe we ought to get into that. But hypothetically, if we felt like that promotion of trade, commerce, industry, and employment opportunities, which is our governmental mission under the Constitution, meant that we needed to find a way to get money in the hands of folks that they could use for working capital, to pay payroll, to pay rent, to make mortgage payments on loans that we didn't make them, that sort of thing. We are not authorized to make a working capital loan as a working capital loan. We're authorized to do something else, though, the promotion of industry, agriculture, and trade. And if we find that a reasonable means to do that is to put money in people's hands, and we don't have to tie the string that you'll spend this on something tangible. We tie the string that you will promote industry, agriculture, and trade. If you do that, what you do with the money is your business. That's kind of where I'm trying to go with this, but we have to be very careful about it. If y'all see any of my social media posts or attended the last sidebar or anything, we're in a period when the regulatory and supervisory agencies are cutting folks some slack. The AG's office is not likely to jump on people if they have problems with, getting a notice out. If you have a link that doesn't work for an open meeting under virtual conditions, you're not likely to get in trouble with the Attorney General. But money is different. And when the dust clears and maybe there's a vaccine or the economy comes back and we learn to live with the virus or whatever, we're also going to have to live with what we did.
Uh-huh.
So we have to be very careful now to stay within the bounds of the law, because one of these days, everybody's going to be held to account for it, I think. But I think we can get the job done anyway. Anyone else? Those were good questions. All right, remember, this is not your last chance to ask questions. But Ilka, you're next on the agenda to talk about the revolving loan program. So maybe cue Ilka, and let me see if I can stop sharing.
Okay. And Dan, if you wouldn't mind sharing a copy of the PowerPoint with me, I'll send it out to the group afterwards. That way, if y'all are preparing for our next meeting. Okay, so as everyone's thinking and preparing for the next meeting, we'll share this PowerPoint so that y'all have it if you need a. The next item on the agenda is talking a little bit about the RLF process and timeline. So you might be saying, okay, now we've done orientation, what's next? So there's a couple things that I want to share with you. Dan has talked a bit about what we are able to do and what the sort of structure around this revolving loan fund is, and around the JDA in terms of being able to give loans. The other thing I want to share a little bit with you is thinking about, my best advice is that we perhaps arrange with a third-party administrator or lender who have expertise in underwriting so that they can work with these individual businesses, look at their unique circumstances, and then maybe the loans that are successful through the underwriting process. And my understanding from some discussions with third-party lenders is that they're willing to use the criteria that the JDA creates for who and what the structures around the loans will be. But once a loan goes through that administrator and the individualized underwriting process, the successful applications could come to y'all, and then y'all would be able to use some of these things we're talking about here. What are the ways that we are going to promote industry, agriculture, and trade, and then determine which businesses will receive the loans. So the mayor mentioned earlier in the meeting, or maybe it might have been on the chamber call this morning, that the idea for Athens-Clarke County Mayor and Commission is that they will seed this fund with $1 million, which is a wonderful amount of money, and it sounds like a lot of money on its face. But when you think about how many businesses that might be able to assist, when you think of a loan cap of maybe between $5,000 and $10,000, which is an amount that the mayor's also mentioned as being part of the conversation, that'll be about 125 businesses maybe. So just thinking about the process with having individualized underwriting where the businesses can have their unique situation looked at by people with expertise in lending. So that was a lot of talking to say that I do think just in terms of being compliant with this loan, making sure that we have some expertise that will be able to assist the businesses and assist the JDA with the underwriting process. And then on the back end, issuing and administering the loans in a compliant way. I think it would make sense for us to consider using a third-party group to do that. Is there any questions or discussion?
Ilka, can you hear me?
Yes.
This is Stephanie. If we do use an independent underwriter, are we still the loan guarantors so that that underwriter is not looking at it as if it's their own money that's on the line?
My understanding is that the JDA, well, have the funds been conveyed to the JDA, Dan, at this point?
No, they have not been, and I don't know what y'all are seeing. I'm seeing the bylaws on my screen. I can't figure out how to stop sharing that, and I apologize. But to answer the question, an administrator is an administrator. It's not, they don't do anything that we don't tell them to do. So if we tell them to be strict and foreclose, and that's what they'll do. But there will be an agreement, assuming we go in this direction, between the JDA and the administrator that will detail all this. The constraints on it from a legal perspective, if we can't make a forgivable loan, and we can't because that's well settled, then we can't make a loan that we know that's not going to get repaid. And that has some implications to the directors personally. I mean, there's a doctrine of governmental immunity here or qualified immunity. So it's not like y'all are individually guarantors that these loans are going to get repaid, but we do have to act prudently with what we do. So the loan administrator may not call the loan or may not, they will, we need them to use their credit underwriting judgment in terms of bringing us deals to approve, but the board will need to approve them. We'll need to approve each deal. We may have one vote with a lot of deals getting approved, but it's not first come, first served. And I don't think we'd be able to write criteria, or I don't think we'd want to write criteria that were so specific that anybody that met that criteria automatically got a loan. I think we'd want more flexibility than that. So what I'm saying is the administrator's job is to, as I see it, now nothing's been done. This is just me talking. Is to do what a bank loan officer would do and to act like it's their money, except that what we're trying to do is to get the money out to do these specific things with an expectation that the money get repaid. I don't think we have to ask for security. We don't have to ask for a personal guarantee. We don't have to ask for a pledge of assets. If we're taking risky loans, then we should. But as long as we have a good faith judgment as directors that this is okay, that we're not making a forgivable loan, then we can approve that loan. It's not the administrator that's going to approve it, but they will screen people and not bring people to us if they fall below some thresholds or some standards that we would express in that agreement. And the board members would have the opportunity to look at that agreement. So it's going to be something that is negotiated and that we think does the job that we think needs to be done.
I mean, considering the circumstances we're under, what troubles me is that the businesses most at risk at failing probably wouldn't meet thresholds that we would be comfortable with to guarantee that they would be a continuing concern. But those are precisely the ones that need the help. And, you know, it kind of bothers me if a bank underwriter is looking at these with their own judgment criteria, because they traditionally have not been very good at giving loans to small businesses operated by minorities. And that's something that I think we should really focus on with this money.
We can tell them to apply the criteria that we put in our agreement with them. So they're underwriting their own money.
So some of the work that, so I've been working with Ryan Thornton on my team in the process of talking to many stakeholders throughout the community, small business owners, groups that work with small business owners, banks that have been working with small businesses, both in this process and before, just to get input on what criteria might be to try to be inclusive and to include different types of businesses and business structures that are common in the community. So after this meeting, Dan's been looking over the draft that we have to sort of make sure it's legal from what we've been able to gather from talking with folks, but it might be a starting point for discussion, just to be able to think about some of those things that you're saying, Stephanie.
I'll appreciate that.
Hear what you're saying.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
The other thing that that I did want to mention is when we're thinking about some of the details of size of business. So to your point, Stephanie, many of the businesses we have are small businesses. And so if those are some of the ones that we need to target, then we're probably looking at certain numbers of employees. So what I can do is I can ask our tax department to run us some lists with the draft criteria so that we could see numbers of businesses that would actually be eligible within the joint development area. So that'll kind of help y'all as you're thinking through, you know, some of the draft and preparing some feedback for it. I think, so one of our balances, making sure that we're helping these small businesses. But another thing we may want to keep in mind is, and I know there was some discussion of this nationally with the PPP loans and the EIDL loans, is if we can help about, you know, I'm going to say 100, 125 businesses, depending on what the y'all decide the loan cap will be. It's going to be important that we save the ones that were steady before this happened. And so just thinking about how will we identify the ones that had already been around and were functioning before this. It'll be more difficult just thinking about taxpayer dollars and a limited pot of taxpayer dollars about which ones that will be the ones that y'all would like to select and want to prioritize the funds for.
Yeah.
Those are just some thoughts. The other thing that I wanted to sort of get your feedback on, and even potentially consider a motion to approve, which would be for us to do an RFP for a third-party administrator. And of course, we wouldn't move forward with that until y'all had we'd probably issue the RFP, but not share the draft criteria until y'all had finalized that. But just thinking about timeline, we'd probably want to go ahead and get the RFP out, because that usually is a couple of weeks where it's live and people can respond. So I'd love anybody's feedback or questions or discussion.
Look, this is Kelly. So would we have sufficient information for a respondent to suitably submit I mean, obviously we're talking, in broad terms about a relatively small amount of money comparative to some other projects that you see many lenders deal with. I mean, you noted that you'd spoken with some outside lenders. Do they seem well situated to respond?
So I was careful about not bringing the topic up, but in the process of talking to several people at financial institutions, one of them brought it up, and they saw it actually as an opportunity for them to have outreach to businesses in the community that they might not normally meet, or that might not normally come to them for a regular type of loan. So for them, they saw it as kind of a community service and a way to meet some more businesses and build more relationships.
Thanks, Ilka.
So do we currently have a baseline criteria or guidelines or documentation that I should be looking at about this decision?
No, so I'm going to send this to you after this meeting. We just sort of wanted to introduce what has been done, some of the things that we'll need to think about, and get y'all's feedback on the third party administrator. Because the other thing is this loan program, this revolving loan, it'll be unique for a revolving loan program in that we'll probably have a cohort that will all go through at the same time, and then the funds will be out for 2.5 years awaiting repayment. And then as those funds get repaid, we can almost have a slightly different set of criteria for the future for other businesses, so that it can become an asset both now to help businesses during this emergency period, and then down the road several years as the money is being repaid slowly, we can also use it to attract other types of businesses to the city of Winterville and Athens-Clarke County.
Ilka, timing wise, do you think that we will have loans in the hands of people in time where they could use their PPP money to pay back the loans? Because I know that's one way that they can use it. Or is it the EIDL money that can pay back loans?
I believe it is I'll have to go back and look at all the details because we weren't directly involved. I believe it's the PPP, but I'll have to go and look.
I can answer that question. So the PPP money is only to be spent for payroll, mortgage, rent, and utilities, period. And you have to provide proof that that's where that money went. You have like 75 or 80% that has to be spent on payroll. And then the balance of that money can only be spent on mortgage, rent, or utilities. The EIDL money has no specifications at all. It's a loan. And if you get beyond like that initial 10,000, whatever amount they decide to lend you is like a 30-year mortgage at 3.75% interest. It's a gift. And you can spend it anyway. So if people got the EIDL, they could use that to repay the loan that they got from us.
Of course, that would make very little sense since the interest rate is higher on that. I guess what I was getting at is if someone has gotten EIDL or PPP, should we look at them as less of a target than people who were not able to get that and need help?
It's probably something we should talk about. And I wonder, when you apply for those loans, the government does ask you what other assistance you've gotten. So I think that would be a reasonable question. The only problem is how do we check up on that, or is that just the responsibility of the third party that administers the loans for us? It's their job.
Maybe as part of the creation of the application process and which questions would be asked to the business as they're applying for this loan.
Definitely. That we should ask that.
Okay. That makes me think that, do we have like kind of an idea of the types of businesses that are the needs of the community that we want to start with and like focus on from jump versus like the back end? Like, do we have an idea of like that the situation as it exists and who we should focus on, like our goals in terms of an authority.
This is Kelly. I'd suggest that at least some of what we need to do is focus on those folks who haven't been able to easily access some of the other sources, and particularly small locally based businesses, you know, under-resourced businesses, maybe underbanked businesses.
Here's let's do on this item, if it's okay with y'all. When we get off this call, I'll send you the draft that sort of details some of the input that we've received so far. And we've got a list of the folks that we've talked to so far in the back of that document, so you can sort of see who shared input and who we talked with. And then next meeting, let's dive in deep and get deep into these great questions, which I think are really central to what it is that the authority is doing and this loan fund. Is that okay with everyone?
Okay.
Yes.
Could I recommend that we perhaps put these documents on a Google Drive? Tim and I can both attest that without some central place where stuff is stored, we all get different copies and then they get all mixed up. And to have it in a central place where if we wanted to make comments or suggestions, they were recorded in a Google Doc with history. What do you think about that?
I like that idea. I just need to check on the unified government side, what sort of a site, like if there's something within WebEx, so because they'll be public documents. So let me just check on that, but I love that idea and I do think it's doable. I just wrote that down on my to-do list.
Thank
So
you.
on that note, would those documents be available to us for review a few days prior to our next meeting?
Yes, so I apologize about the bylaws. This is my first rodeo with the Development Authority. And so I've got a great coach in Dan. But you do have a rookie on your hands. Hopefully I'm a quick learner and I'm doing everything I can to learn as quickly as possible and support y'all. So I apologize about the bylaw document not being to y'all earlier. All right, so there's a couple other quick things I want to talk with y'all about really quick since we're getting close to noon. One item is whether y'all would like to think about that now or wait until next session, but just be thinking about how it impacts the timeline, which is thinking about this third-party administrator. We can percolate on it and wait until next session and think about whether y'all would make to have an RFP to, or make a motion to do an RFP, or if you would like us to maybe start working on a draft of something of what that might look like. And then next session, y'all can talk about it and discuss it and make whatever decision or motion y'all would like to do related to that.
How long does an RFP have to be open?
It's generally about 2 weeks. I think 10 days usually. Isn't that right, Mayor? Maybe. I think it's usually about 10 days, right, Dan? 2 business weeks.
We heard 10 weeks this morning from the city attorney, 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Do we have do we have a draft of the RFP that we could take a look at? Do we want to maybe set forth some criteria and you can draft one up so we can write notes and maybe meet in a week and get that out as quickly as possible?
So I think the RFP will be linked to this draft document related to the criteria, because that'll be an important piece for the bank to know when they're looking at that. So I do think that the two of them are connected. But I can start working on drafting up an RFP.
Okay.
And then the next question related to your other question, which is timing for our next meeting. And the time that that Dan has some availability that we thought would be the soonest that we'd be able to get together next would be Wednesday, June the 17th at 10:30 again.
Okay.
Does that work for everyone's schedules?
2 weeks from now.
Yes, 2 weeks from today. And then I'll have a draft RFP And then after this meeting, I'll send out the draft of the sort of some initial talking points for the RLF for y'all to consider and percolate on, and for us to discuss more on the 17th.
Was there not a day next week where everybody was available where we could kind of expedite this?
I think it's Dan that's not available.
It's not, it's actually not that. I can, of course, make time for a meeting because I have some pretty long days, but we need to get the documents ready. We have some parameters now, I think, subject to the board, of course, but we expect to be able to get those documents in a position to be able to release them about this time next week. But that means that y'all need to be reading them and thinking about them. And we thought maybe you needed a few days to do that. That was the idea of going for basically 2 weeks from today. We can accelerate that if y'all don't need as much time to review them.
Well, if they're on the Google Drive, we'd have access to them while they're in development and, could be familiar with them. But maybe, are there any assignments that you could give us so that we come better prepared for the next meeting? Like issues we need to be willing to make decisions on?
From my point of view, this has been a very good discussion today. I mean, we have given a great deal of thought to this, trying to figure out how to get the job done. I hope we have an idea of what the board is looking for in terms of borrowers that we want to approve. And to me, that's the real big issue. I can handle the rest of it, but that's for the board's discretion. And honestly, what I would like to do in order to help the applicants apply, I don't think everybody ought to have to write an essay, and kind of guess what we're looking for. Ideally, it'd be something like, if I'm awarded this loan, then I will promote trade, industry, and agriculture by doing the following. And there you got a bunch of, check marks, multiple choice answers that folks can look at. Now, that's not to say if you want some money, just pick any one of these boxes. I mean, there would have to be some diligence on that, and that's something that our administrator could do. But, for example, if we have a upper limit on business size, we need to know what that is. If we have a set aside for small businesses, we need to know not just the definition of small business, but what the set aside is. If we have a geographical area that we want to help, like downtown or some other part of town, we need to know that. I don't know. That is the most important thing, and that is independent of the documents, because that's really going to be imported into the documents, the key piece of it.
I would personally like to move forward with having a meeting next week, like Stephanie was saying. I think, at least for myself, I can read through this and get my interests straightened out pretty quickly. So I'd like to move forward, but I can understand if people would like more time than that.
I'm fine with next week. And also, how are we getting the information to the businesses that need to hear it? We need to talk about that as well. Like, what's our outreach?
So part of the outreach for the loan has been kind of outreach to the groups that would be helping us push the information out and share with different businesses they're working with. But along with those lines, when I share it and you see a group that you think would be very helpful that we should add, then we can definitely do that. We've been trying to design the loan and talk to people in such a way that it's not just a loan. There's a web of help and assistance that can come along to help people apply for the loan, that can help people on the back end of the loan once they get the funds, so that if they want it, they can have someone that will help them look at their cash flow and revenue and see if there's any other adjustments that someone might coach them to do that might be helpful in addition to getting the loan.
Okay, thanks.
My wonderful assistant, Jeanette, has already blocked. I wonder if she reads mine sometime, 3:30 next Wednesday for a JDA meeting. So that time's already blocked if you want to do it then. And understand, though, you might not be getting documents in a form that we could say these are ready to go. You might be getting documents to say this is a work in process, but it's the point where it would be helpful and not unhelpful for you to be able to look at it. So if you want to act that quickly, and I'm not surprised, then next Wednesday afternoon would work for me for that.
Okay, so Wednesday, June the 10th at 3:30. Is that for everyone?
It's in the calendar.
Okay, great. And I'll send out
For me.
a WebEx invitation to the group after we get off line here.
And I'll try to figure out how to get WebEx to let me share screens and then unshare screens between now and then.
We can practice, Dan.
I will.
All right. Okay, so we got that covered. We got our next meeting set up. Dan, do we need a call for a motion to end the meeting? Is that part of the procedure?
Well, it's a real live meeting, so we'd need a motion to adjourn in a second, and I've never known a motion to adjourn to be defeated.
Okay, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. It's good to meet everybody, and I'm really looking forward to working with y'all. Oh, wait, Dan.
Do you actually like to vote on that motion?
Oh, sorry. Do another roll call.
Maybe we can do it by acclamation.
Okay.
All in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you, board members. Look forward to working with you. Great meeting today.
You are.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.